So Sam, I'm going to ask you some basic questions.
Sure.
So can you tell us your full name?
SamWeinreb.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Bratislava, Czechoslovakia
In what year?
in 1926.
So that makes you how old right now?
I'm 89 years old.
Sam, what is your religious identity?
What?
Your religious identity.
I'm Jewish.
And now I just want you to tell us whatever you want to tell us about your personal story.
Well, I will tell you that I was almost 13 years of age when I came home from a bar mitzvah lesson. Now, all of you know what a bar mitzvah is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I came home from a bar mitzvah lesson and our home was locked and no one there. Our next door neighbor, who was not Jewish, took me into his home and told me that my parents, two brothers and sister, who was only 6 years old at that time, along with quite a few other people, were picked up and taken away. That afternoon was the last time I ever saw my whole family. Now, I can go on, and shall I go on and talk?
Yes, Sam, please.
Well, this neighbor who helped me came over to me, saw me out there, and evidently my father or mother must have talked to that neighbor and asked him to watch for me when I get home and asked him to help me. Well, the neighbor said it would not be safe for me to remain in that country and that I must leave immediately, otherwise I will also wind up where all the others are. Well, he did get in touch with some people in Hungary, and he told them about, actually the people lived at the border of Hungary, and he knew that they were helping people that were being persecuted leave the country and cross illegally into Hungary, where at that time it supposedly was to have been safer. He was told to bring me to that town immediately and that they will help me. Well, we left the same evening, arriving there close to midnight, where we were met by two of those men. And I was told to get ready immediately and we must start right away in order that we get to that border and cross the border before daylight. One of the men and I started walking toward that border. And after walking with him for about an hour or so, he told me that was as far as he could go. He gave me directions, instructions, how to avoid those border guards, and what to do and how to locate the person I was to see once I reached the town in Hungary. I continued walking, crawling at times in mud, so not to be seen by those guards for the next few hours. Then I finally reached the town in Hungary. I located the person I was to see there, and he told me he would help me and assured me that I'll be okay. He asked me if I had any relatives living in that country. I told him that I had grandparents living there in a very small town, and also an uncle who lived in Budapest, the capital of Hungary. He said to go to the town where my grandparents lived would be much too risky, And if I am caught there, not only I, but they too would be arrested for hiding a foreigner in their home. We decided to go to Budapest and located my uncle. I want you to know it was very, very difficult to even find where he lived and all that. But we did locate him, and I have to tell you, I have never seen him the way he was when he opened the door and he saw me there. He knew immediately that there was something wrong and that something very bad must have happened. He told me I can stay with him as long as I wanted to, and he will help me. Well, after staying with him for a short time, maybe just a few weeks or so, he received a call, and he was told that one of his neighbors reported him to the police department that he was hiding a foreigner in his place. Immediately, he had to make other arrangements for me, and he got in touch with a distant relative who lived in the outskirts of that city, and he agreed that I move in with him. After staying with him for a very short time, maybe a week to 10 days, I saw him waiting for me at a streetcar stop where I usually got off when I came in from the city. He was extremely nervous and upset and said, "Sam, I hate to tell you this, you cannot come to my home. The police were there and they know that I was hiding a foreigner, especially a Jewish foreigner." I immediately got on the first streetcar back to the city. I got on that streetcar and I had absolutely no idea where to go and what I was going to do. I knew that I could not get in touch with my uncle there for fear that he would get in trouble. On the way to the city, I noticed a park and decided to get off and spend the night in that park. The next morning, I went into the city and started to look for some work. I stopped mostly at restaurants, and I want you to know the reason I stopped mostly at restaurants because I was always hungry. And I thought if I could help in a restaurant, at least I'll be getting some food. I stopped at quite a few restaurants, offered to clean the place, wash dishes, and whatever they asked me to do. And I told them they would not have to pay me. All I really wanted was some food for the work I'd be doing. No one would hire me. But there were some that did help me once in a while. The next 8 months or so, I lived outdoors on the streets of Budapest, most of the time sleeping behind a factory that was closed at night, and I felt fairly safe. During the day, I had the very difficult job of trying to get some food. And believe me, it was not easy. There were days when I succeeded, which wasn't very often. On the days when I could not get any food anywhere, I usually checked garbage cans behind restaurants, hoping to find some food in those garbage cans. Can you just imagine what it is like to be only 13 years old? Not having a home to go to, not knowing where you will sleep each night, not being able to speak the language of the country that you're in and be in constant fear. Well, after living like that for a while, I felt that I could no longer go on like that, and I decided to go to the police, and whatever happens, happens. I thought, what could they possibly do to a 13-year-old kid whose only crime was he was born Jewish? How wrong I was to think that way. I did go to the police, told them everything about myself, why I was there, and I told them what happened to my family, all that. And I also told them that I had grandparents living there in a very small town. And would it be possible for me to go and stay with them? I don't believe I finished that last sentence. And I was slapped in my face and told, there's only one place you're going to, and that is straight to prison. I was put into a prison with a bunch of criminals and spent 2 years in that prison. While in that prison, I want you to know, the people that were good to me were the prisoners, not the guards. The prisoners used to steal food and helped me with food and gave me food. And the guards never did anything like that for me. But after being in that prison 2 years, I was told that they will release me in custody of my grandparents. But while I am with my grandparents, I will have to report to the local police department twice every week, every Tuesday and Friday. The first time I went to report to that local police department, I was beaten, called all kind of names. Most frequently, you stinking Jew, we don't need more of your kind in our country. I was also told that if I say anything to anyone, I will immediately be sent back to prison. And believe me, sometimes I was hoping they'll send me back to the prison because I had it a little easier than I had it every time I had to report to that local police department. Well, after staying with my grandparents just a few months or so, the Germans entered Hungary. And whatever happened to the Jewish people a couple of years before in Czechoslovakia was now happening in Hungary. All of us were picked up, taken to a nearby city where people from different communities were also brought in. After a few days, all of us were put on a train into cattle cars and sent to Auschwitz. I cannot possibly to properly describe the terrible conditions while we were on that trip. We had about 65 people in that cattle car. We had soldiers guarding us constantly. The trip took a few days, and we had people on that train who never stopped crying. Others who were praying almost all the time. We had children, little children, who were screaming and crying constantly. And yes, we even had a group of people on that train who were all the time, they were completely silent throughout that whole trip. And I suppose they must have been in a state of shock and wondering what was awaiting them once they reached the camp. Well, when we arrived in Auschwitz, actually the name of the camp that we arrived at was called Birkenau, which was adjacent to Auschwitz. There were soldiers with machine guns and dogs all over the place, making certain that no one escapes. At the gate of the camp, there were German officers who were separating our people as we were entering that camp. Some of our people were sent to the left and some to the right. The people that were sent to the left, and I was in that group, were later sent to work for the Germans. The people that were sent to the right, who were mostly elderly people, women with young children, were all given a towel and a bar of soap and were told that they would shower and clean up. When they got to that place where they were to shower, doors were locked on them, and gas, instant water came out of those showers. Now this went on every single day as thousands and thousands of people kept arriving every day. I was given a number which was tattooed on my arm, and I will tell you what my number was. Initial A, 4659. And I was told that I will no longer need to remember my name. I will only be called by my number. After being in Auschwitz just a few days or so, maybe 3-4 days, we had some company that came to the barrack I stayed in. It was one German officer and 2 of his soldiers. All of us had to stand at attention when they walked in and while this officer spoke to us. And he began by saying, I want all of you to remember what I will be saying to you now. And I want you to remember this real well. This is Auschwitz. Auschwitz is a concentration camp where people will work or be sent to the gas chambers. If you're strong enough and are able to work, you may survive. And I cannot forget how he repeated, you may survive. If you're not able to work, you'll be sent to the gas chambers. The choice is yours. It will be work or the gas chambers. Then this officer, let him answer. Please tell him to answer. Oh, is this the phone?
Yeah.
Nancy, please answer it. Okay.
Hello, this is
Then, you know, this officer, sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
And this officer looked around and asked 2 of the men to come forward. And he looked at those 2 men and said, and I'm quoting him, I don't believe the 2 of you will be able to give us a good day's work. And shot both of them right on the spot. And then turned to us, and with a sarcastic smile on his face, said, this I am sure you will always remember. And they left the barrack. Now that was our welcoming committee to Auschwitz. Now I can continue and tell you what I did there if you want me to do it. You want me to? I'll gladly do it. I'm leaving some things out, but I'm telling you most of the things. Well, while in Auschwitz, I worked in construction, and my job was mostly carrying brick to the construction site. There were so many very cold days that the skin on my fingers came off from touching the cold brick. I also worked in a coal mine where I was too weak to lift the empty huge shovel, let alone a shovel with coal on it. I suppose I was fortunate that the person on each side of me was stronger and was able to load coal into those cars, and the guards did not notice that I was not able to do that. We had a hospital in our camp, and we were told if any of us get sick or hurt on the job, just to go to that hospital and we will take care of you. Well, it didn't take us very long to find out that anyone that ever entered that building never came out alive. So regardless of how sick you were, you just wouldn't say anything. Excuse me for a second. Nancy, take the phone with you.
Okay, and then I'm taking her
Take it
breakfast
with
back
you
there.
and please answer it.
Yes.
Okay,
And then
thank
I'm
you.
gonna make her breakfast and take it back.
Sorry, I
Oh.
stopped.
Okay.
Where was I? Yes, and we got up every day about 5 o'clock in the morning. and received a cup of black coffee and a slice of dry bread. For lunch, which was the big meal of the day, we received a bowl of soup, which consisted of maybe a little cabbage, potato peels, and whatever garbage they could put into that soup. But when you are as hungry as we were during that time, believe it or not, even that soup tasted quite good. The camp was surrounded with barbed wire fences and soldiers on towers surrounding that camp. So escaping from Auschwitz was just about impossible. Shortly before the war ended, we were awakened in the middle of the night, and we were told to get ready immediately, that we're being transferred to another camp. All of us had to get ready immediately, and we had to start to march. And I want you to know, would you mind taking that cell phone too? I apologize.
Oh, no, it's totally fine.
See, I was hoping you'd come last week and everything would have been much easier. But it's
No
okay.
phone calls, though.
I told you the camp was surrounded with soldiers on towers, making certain that no one escaped. Shortly before the war ended, we were awakened, and I just told you that, in the middle of the night, and we were told to get ready immediately, that we're being transferred to a different camp. All of us had to get ready at once, and we had to start to march. We had approximately 5,000 people in the march that I was in. And I want you to know that was not the only march. There were quite a few others just like that. And all of those marches. Is that the door? No, I hope not. And all those marches were later called the death marches. I want you to know, after marching for a few days, of the 5,000 people that started this march, we may have had about 400 or so people who were still alive. Anyone who could not walk for whatever reason was shot and left behind. And I will tell you why so many people were shot and left behind. We were walking, it was very, very cold, icy roads, snow all over it. And most of the people that sat down simply could not get up. And if you couldn't get up, they wouldn't leave you. They had no intentions even to taking us to a different camp. That was never their intention. And that's why so many people died. But when I saw what was going on, it was still dark during the night, I decided that I will run out of that line and try to escape. I knew my chances of succeeding were very, very slim, but at that point it really didn't matter. In fact, at that point I was no longer afraid to die. I knew I was going to die soon anyhow, so I did take a chance. Would you believe, to this day I have no idea how far and how long I ran. The only thing I remember was waking up in a Russian military hospital where I was told that Russian troops had found me lying on the ground unconscious and took me to their hospital. After being in that hospital, by the way, they were absolutely wonderful to me while I was in that hospital. I was only about 80 pounds when I got to that hospital. And they told me that they will help me to get stronger, and then they will help me go back to my hometown. Well, after a couple months in that hospital, they decided that I was ready to go back to my hometown. I cannot begin to even tell you how devastated I was when I did get back to my hometown and found out that no one in my family survived. You know, throughout all those years, while I struggled every single day just trying to survive, lived on the street for so many months, had to look for food in garbage cans, spent 2 years in a Hungarian prison, and after all that, I wound up in the most inhumane place in Auschwitz, the place where thousands of people were murdered every single day. Throughout all that time, the only thing that kept me going, and I'm certain it was the only thing, I used to tell myself that I have to be strong and survive, and hopefully after it's all over, I still will be again with my family, at least with some members of my family. Unfortunately, that did not happen. One of the Russian officers came with me and took me back to my hometown. And when I got back to my hometown, of course, I found no one there, and I couldn't wait to get out of that town and decided to go to Hungary, where my grandparents and many other relatives came from, with the same results. No one there survived. As I was getting ready to leave the town, and after having so many terrible disappointments in my life, something nice did happen to me. I met this young girl whom I knew as a little boy. She and her family lived right next door to my grandparents. And in the summertime, when we had no school, we usually spent some time with our grandparents, and we used to play together. And I was, by the way, she also lost.
I'm sorry, excuse me, Molly?
What?
Isn't it Molly?
Oh,
Molly.
can please let her in for 1 minute, would you mind?
Oh,
No,
no.
it's okay.
What do I do?
Nancy, let her come up and take her in to see Goldie,
And what
okay?
number do I push to
What?
let her in? What number do I?
Push 9, 6,
Six.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry
Oh,
that I
that's fine.
keep. She was one of my wife's caretakers, and she wanted to be sure she sees her before we're leaving, before we're going to leave. And she'll be up in a couple minutes. Anyhow, where was I now? Yeah, I told you when
The little girl who
I
used
went
play
to
with her.
Hungary, to the town where my grandparents. I decided to go back to Germany and stay in a displaced persons camp, which was now supervised by the Americans. And I asked this young girl, of course she was older then, that if she asked her if she would like to come with me and go together to Germany, and we could both stay in that displaced persons camp. She said she would love to go, but she cannot leave because she has one uncle who did survive, but was very ill, and she didn't want to leave him by himself. But you know, we stayed in touch with each other constantly. And after staying in that displaced persons camp, I used to get mail from her very often. She told me she had an uncle living in New York City, and she got in touch with him, and he's going to help her and bring her out to this country. And she said, why don't you try to go to America? I says, to America? How can I go to America? I know absolutely no one there. I wouldn't even know where to begin. And every time I got a letter from her, and every time I spoke to her, and that was very often, it always ended, did you do anything about going to America? Well, after so many months and getting that same question, I decided that I'll try to do something. Germany, which was very close to the displaced persons camp. And I went into that embassy, and I want you to know, before I did go to that embassy, I had someone help me with the English language, so I should be able to ask this person when I get into the embassy in English, because I could not speak English at all. Well, when I walked in, he asked me what I was doing there. I said, I have a girlfriend who bothers me all the time to go to America. He said, to America you want to go? Yes, because we became very, very close friends. And there's even a possibility that if everything goes well, that someday we may even get married. But I want you to let this Molly get in. Is she here?
She's coming up the elevator.
Okay. Nancy, wait for her, please. I was at that embassy. A Jeep pulled up at the displaced persons camp, and I had no idea who it was. And they were paging me, and I couldn't understand why I'm being paged, because while I was in camp in Auschwitz, anyone that was ever paged. Can I stop for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
So this, I told you, anyone that was ever paged in the camp was never seen again. So I really was afraid to answer the page. And there was a person next to me. He says, look out, it's an American. Don't be afraid. You go out and see what he wants. Well, I went out, and when I came out, as I came out, I realized it was the same officer that greeted me at the embassy. And when I came out, he put his arms around me and he said, son, you're going to America. I says, I'm going to America? When am I going? He says, right now. And he took me in his Jeep, and I stayed at the embassy for a couple of days there. And then I came in an American Army plane to a harbor from where I got my ship to this country. That is how I came to this country. By the way, my wife, who was my very, very close friend, came about 7 months later while I lived in that orphanage. You know, I could go on. I have to tell you, 3 years later, I got married. And I married this young girl that I talked about. I was about 20 years old, and she was only 17 years old. And would you believe we just celebrated our 65th anniversary? I could go on much, much longer and talk to you about my terrible, terrible life. I told you my wife lost everyone also. Unfortunately, she now has Alzheimer's. And I feel so very, very bad for her because she doesn't understand anything, but she does understand when I speak to her, everything. But unfortunately, she cannot talk and doesn't talk back. Maybe sometimes she says a few words, but that's about it. And it breaks my heart just to watch her. But you know, my daughter, who is a doctor in Boston, has been really asking me for a long time, Dad, why don't you move to Boston? I'll get you a nice apartment and you will live here, and Mom is going to have it so much better. She'll get the best care anyone can get. And you know, and I thought of it many times, and I thought, it took me a long time to make up my mind. And I had very mixed feelings about it. I really didn't feel like going to Boston, but then I realized that it is very important for my wife to get better treatment. She wasn't getting any better, And there I knew she would get better treatment. And this is the main reason why we're moving to Boston. Now, if you'd like to, I can still talk to you, and you can ask me questions. Don't hesitate. Ask me any questions.
Sam, what was your first job here in the U.S.? What did you do?
Okay, that's a good question. And I came to this country, I was about maybe 16 and a half years old. And there was a person that came to the orphanage every Sunday. Very nice man, used to bring us gifts and always asked so many questions. Every time he came, first of all, he was very nice. I asked him if he could bring me a dictionary and even some old newspapers. I would be very grateful to him. And I just would like to read and answer, and translate myself. And he said, I will come to see you every Sunday because I cannot come during the week. I have a job and I work all week. But I want you to know, I hope you don't mind if I tell you this, I will try to see if you have any relatives or any friends living in this country. I said, you can do it. I says, I have no idea. I was so very young. I had no idea if I have anyone here. Well, a few days later, this man came to the orphanage. He was so excited. He came straight to me and said to me, you won't believe what I'm going to tell you now. I found out that you have a cousin living in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. But I did not get in touch with him unless you tell me that it was okay to do so. The next day, he came to that orphanage, and he wanted to know if I would like to go back with him and his family. I must tell you, I was very reluctant to say yes. I was very shy, couldn't speak English at all, and I didn't know how I would communicate with him and his family. In fact, while he was there, we had to have a translator. I couldn't understand him, nor could he understand me. But when he saw how reluctant I was, he says, come for just 2 weeks, see how you like it. And after 2 weeks, you tell me that you want to go back to that orphanage. I promise you, I will take you back to that orphanage. 2 weeks later, he did take me back to that orphanage, but it was really only to get permission from them that I could go back with him and stay with him and his family on a permanent basis. That is how I wound up in McKeesport. While I was there, he had a jewelry store, and he said he will help me. He says, I'm going to send you to school to learn the language. You're going to learn a trade also. I'm going to make sure you learn the trade about jewelry repairs, watch repairs, and when all of it is over, even while you're going to school, you'll be able to help me at my store. And this is what I did for the next 2 years. And this is how I wound up with him. And as I said, 3 years later, I got married. And my wife moved to McKeesport also. And we got an apartment. Couldn't afford much. We only paid $20-some for the apartment every week. But I just didn't always want to ask money from this cousin of mine. He always offered me money and everything. And I always said I had enough. I don't need any money. I used to go by streetcar every day from McKeesport to Pittsburgh to go to school, first to a watchmaking school. In the afternoon, when I went to a middle school and and observed the kids speaking, and after they were finished, they all ran to me. and started talking to me. And believe it or not, this is how I slowly picked up the language. And I hope I can speak English today. You know, I could keep you all day, but I don't think you need to hear all the cool things that I lived through.
No, I'm gonna transition to a couple of different questions that are more so just about your life and different things that you did when you got here. So, after you got married, how many children did you guys have?
After I got married, I have 2 children.
2.
I have a daughter, I told you is a physician.
Mm-hmm.
She has a daughter who is now 22 years old.
Wow.
My daughter's husband is a professor at Brown University. And my son is an attorney on Long Island. He's married, his wife's name is Barbara, but they have no children. He's married 25 years, but they have no children. And by the way, my granddaughter goes to college now. She's at Columbia University.
Very nice. Sam, what's your favorite thing to do? Like right now, what would you say your favorite thing, your favorite activity is?
The favorite thing, I enjoy very, very much my family. You know, through all the years I struggled. I didn't even know what it was like to have a family. And to me, we are a very, very close family. My daughter and son call every single day. And when my daughter calls after she makes her rounds with her patients, she'll call every morning. And I usually pick up the phone, and the first question that she asks, how is mom doing? And I have to tell you, I used to kid with her once in a while. Why don't you ask once in a while how dad is doing? And I knew she cared for dad just as much, but she was very concerned about her mom. And our son too, they call every day. And we are a very, very close family. I made some nice friends in Pittsburgh, which I hate to leave, you know. And I joined, of course, the Holocaust Center for a long time. They were sending me out to talk, and it came to the point where the schools used to call me direct. And I never said no to any of those schools. And I want you to know I was busy every week, sometimes 4 or 5 times a week. Sometimes I spoke a couple times, even once in a while, 3 times in one day. And that is what I did, but I felt good doing it. Not while I was doing it, but when I was finished with my talks, I felt very good about it. And just hope that I was talking for my whole family, who all of them perished and are no longer here. That was my big, yeah. And then, you know, I had a very, very happy marriage with my wife. Of course, she also was in a concentration camp and lost her whole family. I think I told you 2 brothers and a sister. No, I'm sorry. I said 3 sisters and a brother. I had 2 brothers and a sister. And we really had a very nice marriage for a long time. And you know, when someone pays a compliment to my daughter, you know what she says? I take after my mom. And I want you to know she is taking after her mom. She was always, all her life, so very wonderful. Always was concerned about other people, what she can do for other people. And I'm sure our kids grew up watching their mother do all those things all the time.
That's wonderful. Would you say that what you went through during the war held you back in your life, or no?
Well, to some extent it did hold me back. But I'm trying not to make anything of it and go on with my life like nothing happened. But I cannot get over the loss that I had. That is something that will never get over. But it becomes a little easier, and I have a very happy life with my family. You know, even when we lived in McKeesport, we used to go to Boston every 6 weeks to see our daughter and her husband and our grandchild. We were really a very close family. My daughter right now, as busy as she is, every couple of weeks or so she comes to visit us. And it's not easy for her. She's so busy. You know, she's the head of the residence at our hospital. And she opened up a clinic in Worcester, Massachusetts, where her hospital is, for homeless women and children. And that's a non-paying job. And she loves doing it. She had so many offers to go into private practice, but she didn't want to do it because she wanted to have that clinic. And I will tell you one thing that happened at that clinic, and she really took care of all those people the same as they were taken care of at the hospital in where she was also. Every time a woman came, in fact, once a woman came with a 3-year-old child, and this little boy was quite sick. And my daughter, of course, helped the child immediately. Shortly after that, she came again, and the child was feeling much better, and she brought my daughter a present for Christmas. And I have to tell you what the present was. It was an apple, gift wrapped with a fancy bow on it, and a card saying thank you for everything. And my daughter said to her mom, "Mom, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing." And she always liked doing it. She was honored even by the dean of the medical school. She's teaching at the medical school also 2 days a week, and by the governor of Massachusetts. And she got an award for the first time a female physician ever got that award in the state.
Very cool.
You know, I could brag about my kids a lot longer.
You can brag all you want.
But I better not this. I will tell you, when she got the award, even the governor of the state was there. And when it came to my daughter, there was a full room of people, and of course we were there also. And when it came to introduce my daughter, the dean made a statement. He said, "This introduction I will do myself. Not even the governor will be able to do it." And he was kidding the governor.
Yeah.
And he began by saying, "Today's theme is excellence in medicine. And if you want to know more about excellence in medicine, I want you to look right there." And there is Dr. Weinreb. By the way, she kept her maiden name because she was a doctor for 22 years, and she knew a lot of people, and a lot of people knew her, so she decided to keep her name. But she had so many offers to go into private practice. She even went to different cities that the school, the university sent her to lecture to other doctors. And I have to tell you, she's an excellent doctor and cares a lot. She's one doctor that did not go into this profession because of money. That I can assure you.
Sam, I know you said that you said that you got the number.
Yes.
Would you
Okay.
mind letting Ryan see it?
I will tell you about the number. I no longer have the number, but I want you to see it. My arm. You know, it's 70-some years since I got that number.
Oh.
And here it was.
Oh, okay.
And I told you the number was initial A4659. But I have to tell you, when I came to this country, I used to have nightmares constantly. And I mentioned this to this cousin of mine. And he said, let me take you to my doctor. Let's see what he's going to say.
Yeah.
Well, he did take me to his doctors. He took me to his psychiatrist, to everybody. And I wasn't too excited about that. But when we went to the doctor said, the first thing we ought to do is have that number removed. I want you to know, I'm not really certain if that helped me in any way, but that's when I had it removed. I still have this here, and it always reminds me of the number that I had.
Yeah. Thank you for showing us that.
You're welcome.
Pray.
I spoke at this school on Thursday. It's Bellevue, and it's on the north side.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know.
Uh-huh.
They even brought in children from another school. So they had a huge, huge crowd. And the principal of the school, when it was over, he told me, he says, you know, I've had speakers here for the last 12 years that spoke about the Holocaust to the students. And I hate to say this, most of them, that students couldn't understand what they were talking about. And I always felt terrible, and I always told Samantha, we should always send somebody that can speak the language and make sure that those kids understand you. And some of this, in Natrona Heights, where I spoke now for 20 years, before that they had some people that came, and when it was finished, the students didn't know what he was talking about. And he says, finally we got a speaker that they can understand.
Yeah.
And it's not that I'm bragging about it, but I was so upset when they did send people that weren't able to speak the language, so they should understand.
Right. Right. I agree. And that's awesome that you did that.
So
for
now
long.
you heard quite a bit of my story.
Yeah. It was wonderful.
And Matthew took me to Shadyside Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I got such a beautiful letter from that school that we will never forget you, and thanked me so many times for coming there. I have thousands and thousands of letters from students. I didn't know what to do with it, so I gave it to my son. And my son is trying to write a book. He's making a scrapbook
Yeah.
and hopefully give it to our granddaughter.
That's great. It's a really good idea.
I feel someday, at least in fact, not that my granddaughter is not interested in it now, she is, but she'll be very excited when she gets that scrapbook, I think.
I will. Well, Sam,
I bet
thank
you can't